my analogy for that, right, is you've got possession of the ball and you have to make a decision. Who are you going to pass the ball to make a really good decision? And somebody may be calling out to you for the ball, but you know that's the wrong decision, and you make
Right.
a decision in the moment to pass somewhere else. I have to be responsible for my choice at the end of the day. So how do I have the confidence not to go with what's asked of me, but to go with what I know is the right answer? Working on what I would call a one-way door decision, which is you go through that door, you don't come back. It's very hard to come back, right? That's a Jeff Bezos-ism, which is the concept of a one-way door and a two-way door, which I love it. You have to recognize when you're in a dense fog. And when you're in a dense fog, you cannot make good decisions about the long-term decisions about your life. You cannot. You have to find a way to the clearing. What was the most unexpected choice you've made in your career history?
Hey everyone, do me a quick favor and double check that you are a follower or subscriber wherever you listen to the show. I'd be unconditionally grateful. Every new follower, listener, and subscriber helps us keep creating content we love and that you enjoy. It's the best way to ensure you never miss one of my unconversations. You are on the sun journey with us, and thank you for that. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Unconversations podcast. I am your host, Dr. Alison, and today I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Krystal Zell. She is the Executive Vice President and Chief Customer Officer at Floor Decor. Krystal, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Allison. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You and I we have been in communication with each other, and we met each other through a mutual friend who we both adore. And she just was like, you are going to love meeting Krystal. And I have every step of the way with you. We met each other as you were kind of going through a transition that I cannot wait for us to get into. But you have had so far just an amazing career, and I'm just really excited for us to kind of dive into that. Really, thank you so much again for your time this morning.
Yeah, thanks so much. I hope I live up to your expectations.
Oh, I think you will. So far you have, for sure. I have just really adored getting to know you, really. So before we get started, this is a way that I love for my listeners and viewers to get to know my guests, and that is through the unword effect. So I love for us to get into your process first, and then we'll get into the 3 words that really resonated with you.
Okay, great. Well, my process is probably typical for me, which is I thought about it. I thought that's really interesting. I didn't have an answer. And then I waited until I had to have an answer because that's how my brain works. And then I sat down and worked on it, and I still didn't have an answer. So I talked to Gemini, since Gemini knows me so well. And I said, Gemini, how would you, if you had to use unwords to describe me, how would you? And it really knew a lot about me. That was really frightening, actually. And then I didn't love those. And then I asked my husband, and he had all kinds of words. He's got the crossword puzzle, so he's got a lot of unwords. So he had all.
Oh, wow.
And it's also very revealing to ask your partner how they would describe you. They're like, oh, really? That's the word you would use. Okay. But yeah, so then after all of that settled on the 3 words, that was the process.
Now, did any of the words that your husband said, did they make the list?
Kind of, yeah. He recommended unpretentious, which I turned into one of my words, which was unassuming. So I kind of I turned it a little bit. I didn't love unpretentious, so I turned it into unassuming, kind of similar. Yeah, so that was good.
What was the unpretentious about you from a professional, or more you from a personal?
I think both. Because so as we'll talk about in my background, I tend to be pretty grounded just from where I've come from, and I think my family and my life story, I've stayed very grounded. So that's where the unpretentious came from. But
Oh my gosh, that's great. That's great. Well, let's start with your first one, which I do have to say other leaders have used this. And I think it could be the person that introduced us, but I think there's a group of women that you guys know each other, and I really think it should be called like the undeterred group. I mean, you.
right.
What was what did that word, when you first thought it, like, yeah, that is, and then if you could kind of really describe what that word really means for you, that coming from more of a past, and it was a journey to you for you to kind of get to the undeterred place, or is it something too that you're possibly maybe still working on?
Well, I think the undeterred, if I thought back on my history and kind of starting with like adolescence, right, where we go through the process of developing our character and ourselves. I remember just being very unafraid, being very determined, and I don't know where that came from, but I was determined to be the best student possible. I was determined to go to a great college. I was, and these things were not, I came from a very, fairly blue collar. My dad was a cop, middle class kind of family
Oh, wow.
without like, people going through to college. And so my parents would have been delighted for me to go to the state school, which was Arizona. So Arizona State, down the street. And I just was like, no, I'm going to do more in my life. Like I want more. And I just was never afraid of it. I was very undeterred. So, I applied to tons of colleges. I, went to college sight unseen because I couldn't afford to do all the pre-visits, nor was it a priority for my family to fly me around the country and like, let's go take a look at this college, So I went to Rice University. The first day I showed up, I'd never, been on campus before. But I was, like I said, undeterred. I just was determined. And then I would say that determination has followed me through my life. It's this feeling of it's going to work out. I just know everything will work out. And I'm not afraid, and I'm willing to take things on. I've, in my career, taken on a lot of very big projects that I think that would have frightened other people in certain
Oh,
environments.
for sure.
And I'm just undeterred. It's like, nope, we're going to do this. This is what we're going to do. We're going to make it work. And I guess it's just been a feature of my background. And I do think, it was innate to me, but I do think it's important to develop a bit of that in women because, the world is tough, right? It demands a lot of us.
Yeah.
And it helps to have a little bit of that kind of, I wouldn't call it blind ambition because it's not ambition with all the negative connotations. It's really just the determination, kind of the blind determination.
Do you think that your undeterred also comes along with, did you just have an innate confidence within yourself, or was that something that had to evolve, or do you find those to kind of go hand in hand a little bit?
I don't think I had innate confidence. I think I had, honestly, I think, the beginning for me was academic success. I was just a really good student, but I think I was a really good student because I loved being a student. I loved learning. And I just loved learning. I mean, my mom talks about, she taught me to read when I was 4, and I was, reading chapter books before I was 5. Like I just loved to read.
Wow.
And so I think what happened was, and it's interesting raising kids and having different sorts of kids, but school is very kind of specific and demanding in a very particular way. And it worked for me. I was sort of, I'm reading this great book right now by Jim Collins called What to Make of a Life. And he uses the phrase encoded. And it's like figuring out what you're encoded for is a big part of your
Yes.
journey. And I think I
Yes.
was encoded to be a good student. I loved it. And so I got feedback, right? You get A's, you get 100 on the test, all these things. And I think over time that built confidence, but I definitely don't think it was innate. I think it was earned. It was very much earned confidence. And in fact, I would say I had to work on throughout my career having confidence in my instincts. I'm finally more at that place, but I would say most of my career, I would look at things and I would see them differently than people around me. And I would think, I don't think I agree with what everybody's saying. Like, I don't know that I see the consensus. And earlier in my career, I would think I must be missing something. There's information I don't have. I must be wrong, right? Because everybody sees this and I see that. And I think
Yes.
over the years with the feedback mechanism of you see that in a moment and a year later you look back and you're like, actually, like I wasn't wrong about that. My instincts were good. And then you sort of
Yes.
learn to trust your gut. Like the other day we were working on something at work and we were kind of working on what I would call a one-way door decision, which is you go through that door, you don't come back. It's very hard to come back, right? That's a Jeff Bezos-ism, which is the concept of a one-way door and a two-way door, which I love it.
Yes.
The idea is
Yeah.
it helps you with decision making. And we were making a decision about a one-way door. And I was like, I can't articulate to you all my logic yet, but something about this doesn't sit right with me. My gut tells me this is the wrong decision. And I would say even 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I would never have articulated that. And now I'm comfortable articulating that and saying, I've had enough experience. I trust my judgment enough. I can't fully form the argument yet, but my gut is telling me this is the wrong decision. Like, so let me sit with it for a little bit. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
confidence takes time. It definitely takes time.
Yeah. I would agree, and I love that story that you just shared as well, because I think the confidence, I hear from leaders that the undeterred, yes, they're undeterred because they see the greatness that they can achieve in their professional and in their personal lives, but that confidence really gets built more around that internal work and really trusting your gut. And I'm so happy that you said that, because I feel that women leaders sometimes don't stick with that gut instinct that they're having, or being swayed by the majority. And I love that you're just like stopping and going, but wait, something is still just not right, and sticking to that. And I think that's a great leadership point that I'm glad you brought up, because I find many leaders, and especially women, questioning that so much, instead of going, that's a sign that you should be paying attention to.
Yeah, I think it's
So,
really, really important. And I'll tell you a little bit, just another anecdote on that. One of the things I love is my daughter she's 15. I have a 15-year-old daughter, so I think a lot about her development. And she has played soccer forever. And I love the girls' soccer because it's so good for teaching these things, like these life lessons. I watch these girls out in the field and they fight, and the longer they play, the older they get, the harder it is, right? But my analogy for that, right, is you've got possession of the ball and you have to make a decision. Who are you going to pass the ball to? You have to make a really good decision. And somebody may be calling out to you for the ball, but that's the wrong decision. And
right.
you make the decision in the moment to pass somewhere else. And I see it all the time on the field. And I think, what a great life lesson for these girls, that they're in a moment having to make the decision, think for themselves, find the right answer. And the reps, so I was going to say, the confidence comes with the reps, because the first time you make that decision wrong, and that happens really young. So for example, when they're 8, 9, you don't want to pass the ball back yet. It's too dangerous, like by the goal. You're not there yet. And the goalie, they call for the pass the ball back. And the first time somebody steals the ball and scores on you after you pass the ball back, you learn to question that choice, right? And you're like, which choice am I going to make? And so I think, I watch that, and I think it so much of that is analogous to life and work, is like, okay, what, I have to be responsible for my choice at the end of the day. So how do I have the confidence not to go with what's asked of me, but to go with what I know is the right answer?
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. I think that's why I also enjoy having professional coaches and athletes on the show, because they use exactly that same that same analogy on how they sort of approach life and their own leadership and their business. And they talk about how that brain development that you're talking about, because in your daughter's situation, for example, sometimes passing the ball to the person you want to be liked, maybe, and but at the same time you begin to evolve and have the confidence and the strategy to say, hey, that person's open, I'm not passing them the ball because I don't like that person, but the best strategic move would be this person that maybe they would at least expect to get the ball, and you end up getting a goal. So yeah, I love that analogy. Appreciate you sharing that. So the next word you have, which I think is really great, and this is unassuming. Yeah, what was unassuming for you? Because I love this word sometimes. There are leaders who have used it, and sometimes I would say, I don't know if that one really kind of fits, but I think this one really fits well with you. Tell us about that word, and just maybe an example that you could share about how that word really kind of is instilled within you.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I think unassuming is sort of related to like a feature of who I am in my life, in that I really, I guess, embrace lots of different contexts of work and people. And so, from early on when I left Arizona to go to Rice, sight unseen, and then when I went after that to Bain, in my first, and then, sorry, at Rice, I went to Argentina and stayed for a year and just immersed myself in Buenos Aires and the culture and the people, and loved it.
Beautiful.
And it was wonderful. And then I went to Bain in Dallas afterwards, and the opportunity came up because we were, at the time, our Mexico City office had been closed for a while, and we were serving Latin America through the Dallas office. And I had the opportunity to spend a year and a half working in El Salvador, and I eagerly volunteered.
Wow.
I speak fluent Spanish, sent me to El Salvador, like lived in like this basement office, conference room, really, with a bunch of colleagues. Had a great time. Spent a year and a half, and it was, yes, it was not delightful in that regard, but it was delightful with the people and the client, right? And it's El Salvadorian airline was our client, and that was wonderful. And then I eagerly wanted to get to New York and have a whole different people. And then I went and worked at Saks Fifth Avenue for a year, and then in New York, and worked in fashion and had so much fun, and just kind of adapted to sort of, and it was such a different world, right? I mean, and it was a world I didn't know, didn't understand. And I'll tell a funny little story about it, that I kind of think about. I don't think I've talked about this story, but I love the story. So I was going to go to business school, and on a whim, this job opportunity came to me, and it was just a manager role for a year, working for this. It was a kind of a chief of staff working for the CMO in New York. And on a whim, I went and did this job in deferred business school. I found out the same day that I got the job, and then I got into Harvard Business School in Wharton. And I'm like, am I going to, on a whim, move to New York and spend a year working in fashion, or am I going to go to business school? And so, one side of the brain is like, why would you go to New York and work in fashion? You should go to business school. And the other side of my brain is like, no, I'm going to New York. Like, this is way too much fun. And I'm a pretty cerebral person, but I just this is what I wanted to do. So anyway, so I go, but I'm like living in the Banana Republic era. I basically make, hardly make enough money to dress well. And I fly up to New York, and they want me to attend a meeting before I even started, so I can get whatever. And I'm 25, I have no money, and I didn't bring any clothes to New York to go to a meeting. This was like a last minute request before I had moved. And so I stopped at Ann Taylor and bought what I thought was a really nice button-down blouse. And then I go into the building, and I'm looking around like, what in the world was I thinking? This is not cutting it. From a fashion perspective, everybody's so beautiful.
Right.
Dressed, but of course, they all had their discounts. So they were all buying discounts, because it's not like fashion pays very well. So anyway, the heart of being honest, and then I said, okay, I'm gonna, dress myself up a little bit. And I ended up I got stolen from the CMO by the president of the company to be like his sort of chief of staff. So I was constantly
Wow.
with the executives all the time. I was 25 and I was like constantly with the executives. So I really had to start dressing nicely. But anyway, so it was kind of a funny transition. And I still to this day love fashion. So I had to sort of fit into that environment, and then went to Harvard Business School, which is a fairly like it has all walks of life, but it has a flair of elitism, honestly, right at that school, and so that was a whole new
Sure.
experience, right, for me, and then. But then I could go from that, and then I went to the hotel world, which was all about hospitality, which I love, and then I went to Home Depot, which is, honestly, kind of a blue collar culture, which I also just love, 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 love. So I think the unassuming part is just I kind of can go to lots of different environments, and I just embrace the environment. I embrace the people. I embrace the experience. And I see so much good in all of these places. All
Yes.
the different subcultures and I just see good in all of it. So I don't know. I think that's why I landed on the unassuming.
So you really at a young age sort of got a taste of kind of what a CEO's life would be. So I'm sure that was pretty attractive for you also at that time. But I also really respect you and I share, I think, this in common. And I had Stacy Tank on the show, and that's how you and I met. And I think that's another really great character about wonderful leaders that are unconventional, because they're adaptable. We were talking about food, how we, enjoy going to, these mom and pop restaurants to get like the best tacos or something. And then you can put yourself in a very Michelin star restaurant and really enjoy that as well, and just adapt yourself. And I think I love that, because that's how I grew up. I grew up very much where you respect the culture. I was born in New York, and I remember my grandmother would take us into Chinatown, and she would tell them to remove all of the forks and go, they will learn how to eat with chopsticks. And I think, I've taken a lot of that into my own career. I just immerse myself into different cultures and people. And I think that makes me just even a more well-rounded leader. So yeah, I love that. I think that would definitely.
It's a lot. If you think about like life, the world is such an interesting place. People are so interesting. So if you take the time to get to know them, to hear their story, to really like immerse yourself in these very different environments, I mean, it's, I don't know, I think it's fun. Keeps life interesting.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. I'm glad you slid that in. I think it's a lot of fun as well. Let's go to your last word, unexpected. I think you're unassuming and almost unexpected are kind of close together, possibly.
That's probably true. Yeah, I think unexpected. I think I was thinking a little bit more when somebody that I don't know that well, and I meet them and they look at my resume, they're like, huh, that's interesting. Like, I can't quite put it together. How did you go from that to that? So it's a little bit more of the external flip of the unassuming is very internal.
In your high level roles, or more of just your vast majority of places that you went into?
Everywhere. I mean, and I even think personally too, right? So personally, you occupy a part of a community. Like we happen to live in Atlanta. We have a community very much associated with our children's school, school and sports and all the things. And I think that I don't talk a lot about my background with kind of randomly with whoever I'm talking to, but when things come up, I always get these looks like, oh, that's very different. Oh, that's interesting. So,
what were you expecting?
Right. So it's not, well, like, oh my gosh, I'll never forget. When we first moved here, I got recruited to Home Depot, and we were in New York, and we ended up moving here, and the neighbors literally at the house next to us, and we meet them, and they, he looks at my husband and he says, "What brought you to Atlanta?" Because we said, "Oh, we moved from New York." And he points at me and he goes, "Her job." And he literally, the man could not compute. He was like, "You moved, what did you do? Like, you moved for her job?" Like, it just did not compute. It was so funny. And I mean, yeah, we can all complain about it. I don't really care. I thought it was hilarious. It just kind of cracked
Yeah.
me up that we so surprised this man. Very nice man, fantastic family, very nice people. But it just didn't compute. So I think a lot of unexpected, like, people get to, and then, I am who I am, but part of it too is maybe the community we live in, but unexpected is.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think the South. I mean, I'm in Dallas, so I think the South, I think, still has kind of those old school thoughts. Oh, you must have moved for your husband, and thinking, oh, the husband maybe has a higher paying job or whatever the assumptions are, kind of around it, but. I still think today, everywhere, I think it's still a very hard thing for people to compute that, yeah, we move for the job, regardless of, from a financial standpoint or not. It could just be that you moved because this was a really great opportunity at Home Depot. I mean, you held a very high level role there. But I think just that computing of, wait, you moved for your wife? Like, what? What do you mean? You're like, well, that's what we did.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, my whole
it's
career,
just very interesting.
when I showed up in El Salvador speaking fluent Spanish, looking like me, they were like,
Yeah.
"Oh," so anyway, my point is that it's my whole life. It just kind of seems to follow me.
Yeah, I think it's great. Well, and that's part of why I was so happy to have you on the show, because there's some other areas that I'm looking forward to us getting into now that I think really highlights that for sure. You and I met, and you were at Tonal. You were just transitioning out of Tonal. So I kind of wanted to sort of start kind of around that journey. I know you worked at Home Depot, another big opportunity for you. And then you went to Tonal, held a CEO position there, very well known. All these companies you've worked with are huge and very well known. But I was really interested because it was a big turnaround project that was going on at that time. So I'd love for us to kind of talk about that opportunity there. And then you were in or just touching on your sabbatical about the time that we met. And that topic has really started to come up a lot as well. So I sort of wanted to start with the Tonal, if that works for you, and then we can sort of transition into the sabbatical time, and then really how you then were laser focused on finding the next opportunity that was really going to work for you. And that's how you landed at just a wonderful company at Floor Decor.
Sure. So it's the Tonal story. I love telling the story because it's unexpected also. So I had been at Home Depot about 5.5 years, and I had led a couple of very big transformations around our pro customer and how we went to market for the pro. And I was like, per usual with me, there's a time limit to my brain's interest in single problems. And I just need, and I had a lot, to be fair, I had a very large organization and I had a lot of problems, which were great. We built a machine learning team that was super best in class, built this whole pro go-to-market experience. I learned all about how to run contact centers. But I had done the job for 5.5 years. I do think, just for career advice, like 5 years is kind of that point. And I would say, it happens more when you're 5 years is kind of a senior level tenure, right? And it's that tenure where you really need to make sure you're staying super challenged and engaged. And I was starting to be complacent. I maybe not complacent. It was a little bit complacent, but also looking for the next big problem to solve. And so I really thought about staying at the company and looked at different opportunities in supply chain, in product, like we're talking about maybe centralizing product management at the time. But it didn't feel right. I mean, at the end of the day, it didn't feel right. And I couldn't articulate it at the time, and I was actually, I have a great relationship with the CEO and was talking through where I could go. And it just didn't feel right. And I think I realized later, like in retrospect, the answer was that I wanted to go somewhere smaller with a different pace. Home Depot is a wonderful, amazing organization, but it is very large.
And huge.
It's
Yeah,
it's
huge
very
organization.
160 billion of revenue, the one of the most well-run companies out there in the world, and I am so grateful for the time I spent there learning. But I was kind of ready to test my own leadership skills in a different environment, and it was kind of in early 22. There was a team at Spencer Stewart I've known for a long time, and they called me about a leadership role at Tonal, and it was a president role. And just to kind of give
Krystal, can I ask you a quick question, real quick? Because what you said is interesting. So when someone's in a multiple C-level positions that you've been, when you say that 5-year time, is that 5-year time for most, or is that sort of your internal clock that is sort of like, okay, I've been in this role for 5 years. Am I really getting what I want? Is the growth there? Is financially there? What's that process like for you? And is that your own internal process?
I've read articles that there's some research. Actually, HBR had some research about that 5-year point, actually. So I've read that. I think it's very much the answer is it depends. But it does seem to be that there is some data around that kind of 5-year mark. Not for a CEO. I think a CEO tenure can be much longer. But I think a C-level tenure, that 5 years, and it really depends on the organization. If you're at a very, very large company as an EVP, for example, there's more than enough transformation to do for you to lead or, work for you to drive for more than 5 years. I think at the role I was at, which was kind of a level below, I sort of was itching for the next problem, and the next, set of challenges to tackle. Part of it was for me, it was energy. Like I'm a big fan of manage your energy, not your time. And if you wake up depleted and you got a decent amount of sleep, if you're depleted in the middle of the day and the day is dragging on, you really need to pay attention to that. Because for me, like when I don't know, at least in my experience, when I'm really working at my best, the day flies by, I don't even notice. When I am not working at my best and I notice, right? It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm dragging. And so I just think you have to pay attention to your energy. And for me, that 5 year, and I was promoted twice at Starwood, but I spent 5.5 years at Starwood on the Starwood Preferred Guest Program. Like I didn't break out into any a hotel brand or any other marketing role. It was all within the loyalty program. And it was also at about 5.5 years that my gut was like, okay, it's time for me to learn a new body of work. And I do think for me, personally, the way that I'm driven is, it's interesting. I spent time with it when I was interviewing for a private equity role. They super head to toe sort of examine you, which in some ways is useful because you learn things about yourself. But it's like going through a root canal. But one of the things that I learned is I had to meet with a psychologist. One of the things I learned about myself is I guess there's different drivers. And for me, one of my biggest driver is the concept of mastery, which doesn't mean mastering a problem, but it does mean going through that super steep learning curve. When you start something new, there's this really steep learning curve and then you kind of even out. And when I'm at that evening out place, I get antsy. I'm like, okay, I like to be on the steep curve. I don't like to be in the evening out. So if you are built like that, then you really have to pay attention to these kind of, it might be 3 years at a director level, maybe it's 4 years as a VP, 5 years as sort of a more senior VP, just, I don't know, you just pay attention to your energy if you're built like that.
Yes. Yes. No, I appreciate you bringing that up because I think that's also really important. And I've heard common themes from other leaders that I've had on the show that when that plateau begins to sort of happen, they get very antsy and they're like now looking for the next, opportunity that's going to, rejuvenate them, kind of going along with your energy. So,
right. I mean, I was a really good kid, but in 5th grade, I was very, very bored and became very stupid. And they had to move me into like the 7th grade class because I was disruptive. That's the dark side of that personality is, when you get bored, you sort of start looking around and poking holes.
I think that's that unassuming quality that you probably don't tell a lot of people about that I could see. So yes, I certainly didn't mean to get us off track, but I was curious about that topic in regards to, because, people would hear like, wow, she had this great opportunity at Home Depot, and why would you leave that? And so I think that's, so I think that was.
I spent a year afterwards wondering, did I do the right thing? I had this amazing, and then I was thrown like Alice in Wonderland, or actually, I guess it's like Dorothy. I felt like Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz. I woke up and I was like, what happened to my life? What is going on? But it makes for an interesting life. I mean, that's the thing. It makes for interesting work. It makes for an interesting life.
So then you then went to Tonal.
So I take the president role, which the plan is we're still so we're at the tail end of COVID at this point, but we don't know it yet, right? Because it's like you don't know until you look back. You're sort of in 22 and you're at the tail end of COVID and the company exploded because it was just like the perfect COVID product, right? And the product was created. So the product is, for the audience who may not know, it's digitally based strength training. So it's a device you put on your wall, and you don't even need a home gym anywhere. It doesn't take up a lot of space, and it uses AI, and it's totally customized to you. So you can do literally a completely personalized full body workout, strength training with this like super cool computer on the wall. And the company just took off. And I think there was
between you guys and Peloton at that time, I mean, everybody during COVID was wanting to build the best gym that they possibly can because they had no idea, fitness centers were closed, yoga studio, everything was closed. And so everyone's like, hey, I want to build now these most amazing gyms. So it would only be a no-brainer that Tonal would go through the roof.
That's right. So, and they needed help driving all of this growth, right? And managing the growth. And I think, I had a thesis, which I still believe about the company, which is that there's this opportunity to advance the domain of strength training by bringing data to it. And especially, I think, you think in the world we're in today with GLP usage and concerns about muscle mass loss, they're really the only player in the market that's doing strength in a highly data-driven way, in my opinion. Now, it's very specific. The domain is specific, so that it's in your home, right? And a lot of people want to train in a gym. They want to go to classes, et cetera. So they haven't kind of conquered the rest of the market in that way. But I do think from a secular perspective, there's a trend. And so I kind of joined thinking about the potential around strength training and data from a long-term perspective, but the market shifted very quickly and the company was very dependent on venture capital fundraising, and they were late stage Series F at the time. And we had a fundraising that ended up not completing. And that meant the business model got really tough all of a sudden. And so long story short, what ended up happening is I was hired by the founder. He was the CEO at the time. We flipped. I became CEO and the founder became Chief Technology Officer, reporting to me. And then I proceeded to sort of say, okay, let's look down the road. Everything's changing. COVID's changed. We're not going to everything. We're like at the tail end of that wind. and we have a whole bunch of product on order based on different forecasts and assumptions. We have a company to maintain for the long haul. So how do we set the company up to succeed long term? And there was just a ton of work to do in that process to get that company to literally respond to what felt like a shift in the environment over the course of a very short amount of time.
How were you feeling? And I mean this more from a personal question. How were you feeling at this moment as a CEO and all this responsibility? I mean, what kind of thoughts were you sort of your own internal thoughts that you were having? Because there's a lot of CEOs probably in this exact moment that are like, "Oh, Krystal, you're speaking my language."
Sure. I mean, well, it was, I kind of joked about it with the board, having been where I had been. It's the first time I was dealing with balance sheets and actually having to pay attention to the balance sheet. And I had to learn a whole new, and so I guess the way I looked at it was undeterred. Like, we're going to fix this. And we had a lot to fix. We're going to roll up our sleeves and fix it. And then I think I did what I've done before in big projects and growth projects. This was just a flip of a growth project. And I talk about this a lot. I think this is really important. So people who can do big transformations, the way you do it is you have I wouldn't call it a clear vision of where you're going, like where you're going to get to. But it's clear enough, right, that you can articulate it and people can understand it. You don't need to fill in all the details, but you need to say, this is where we're going. And then you need to have a very clear picture of exactly what you're going to do in the short term. And you can define the short term differently. So right now we're driving a whole bunch of projects at work. My short term is really 3 to 6 months. These are the things we're going to get done in 3 to 6 month time horizon. When you're doing a turnaround and you're in somewhat of a crisis situation, you're really talking about days. Like, this is what we're going to get done today. This is what we're going to get done this week. This is what we're going to get done this month. And I'm not going to worry about 60 days at this moment in time. I'm going to get there when I get there. And I think having the confidence that you'll get there, and then when you get there, you'll figure it out, is really, really important. And I think I had the confidence from having run pretty transformative projects in the past, just different content, right? A different outlook, a different content, a slightly different timeline. And so I just it's like you just roll up your sleeves, you put your head down, you focus on the thing you need to get done. And then you also focus on activating your team. And this is just a period, for any transformation that you need to do, is you have to over communicate. They really have to understand where you see things needing to go. And then you need to find the right people to trust, but give them permission to go then bring everybody along and do all the work that needs to get done. But you have to over communicate that vision so everybody's clear. Like, this is where we're going. So now I need you to go tackle this problem, and it's on you. You figure it out, right? It's empowerment of your team, but they have the vision clear of where they need to go.
You brought up something interesting during our prep meeting, and I let me know if this is a good time to kind of interject it here. But I think it really speaks to your leadership. And was this something that you learned at Home Depot, or did you learn it in some other place? But you mentioned to me about that you really care deeply about the people that you're working with. And here in a let's say a crisis situation, it's very easy to lose sight of that you're working with human beings. And I've seen a lot of leaders, it's forgetting now that there's human beings in people's, lives. And it's just total driven on, hey, we have to get out of this. And how do you balance that? Because when you brought that up to me, I thought it was so great about your leadership style that you really do truly care about the people. And it doesn't mean that you can't be a really strong leader at the time of crisis. But I don't know if that's something that was sort of instilled in you, which is why you were able to give such confidence to the people, like, this is going to be your job, and I'm trusting that you're going to be able to
Yeah.
execute what needs to be executed.
Well, I think you really need to dig into the why of the work and not the what, because I think you connect with people on the why. And so
Yeah.
what I mean by that is I love the people at Tonal. We have fantastic staff. And one of the reasons people came to work at Tonal is because they believed in the mission. You know, these are people who are fitness fanatics, love working on fitness, believe, you know, and you're talking about sort of you know, it's hard, I think, sometimes to find the opportunity to work on something you're super passionate about and you believe in, right, in your gut.
Yeah.
Because a lot of work is making trade-offs. We all have bills to pay, we have houses to pay for, and food to put on the table, and all those things. So we make trade-offs in the choices that we make. And this was a group of people who loved fitness, believed in the mission, right? And one of the things that I personally connected with, I love creating opportunities for people to do work they're passionate about and they believe in and they believe is meaningful. Because we spend a lot of our time working, right? And so,
Yep.
and work can be such an emotionally satisfying thing. And so what connected for me was the mission of, we're going to make sure this company exists for the foreseeable future so that people who are passionate about fitness and making the world a healthier place can do great work. And that was what got me motivated. And it was how I connected, I think, with the team, which is like, we're going to do the right thing for this company so that you can continue to do great work. Right. Like, so I had data science teams exploring the kinds of exercise that really produce the best results for people. And they were super motivated by that because they were all fitness fanatics.
Yeah.
Like, and by the way, that's great. Like we're working on health. I mean, you know, you could be working at a social media company instead. I mean, that's not working on the world's health. So, you know,
Right.
right? Like, it's kind of like, this is an amazing place to work. We could do great work. And my job was to protect the ability to do that. You know, that's very different. I don't think, you know, there obviously people can be, everybody's motivated by different things. And certainly financial opportunity is a big part of what motivates people. But I do think for the vast majority of people, outsized financial gains is just not their driver of satisfaction every day and what they care the most about. I think they care about, there's a whole variety of other things, which you've got to find, like people just, they care about, you know, doing great work and work that suits them, that they feel good at, and work that contributes and has impact. And
Yeah.
so with the way that I think about building teams, and I think it's super, super satisfying to work on a high performing team. I mean, how great, and this go back to sports, but like when you're part of a winning team, it feels fantastic, right? And so part of, you know, I've always thought of my job is to create this feeling of being, if not on a winning team, on a team that's building itself up to win, right? That is going to eventually win and get there. Even if you're not there yet, it's like, we are going there and we're going there together. And here's why, like, here's what it means for you and what it means for all of us. So it's a little bit of an unconventional, you know, approach, I think, but it also is what suits me and what is meaningful to me, because it's what I'm driven by too. So,
Yep. Yep. Well, and I think you're driven not only by the work, but I think that goes back to my point with you, which unfortunately it is quite unconventional, that you also get motivated by the success of the people around you as well. So, and I think I think that's unfortunately a unique thing to hear someone who has been in the levels that you've been to say that you really truly, and I can even hear it in your voice, that you really truly care not only about your success, and like you said, you know, why we spend most of our time at work. And I think you do find greater job satisfaction in your roles when you really do see your team thriving, as well as, of course, profits and customers. And, you need all of those things, obviously, of course, for a successful business. So I want to make sure we transition into this, because I think my first question for you is really around your exiting of Tonal, from the standpoint, what was that like for you? And then I'd like us to go into your sabbatical and what that was really like for you, because you said something also, which was, and I understand, and you and I will both say this, not everyone gets this luxury to be able to do this. But what I think is important is how you went about identifying your next opportunity that you really wanted. And I think that part was very impactful, because I think we don't spend enough time really thinking about that. I think sometimes either we're unhappy with something, so we want to jump really to the next thing. But I think how you strategically kind of went about it within your sabbatical, I really think was so fascinating. And I wanted to kind of get into that part of the discussion with you.
Yeah. So I spent 2.5 years at Tonal and got the company into really, really good financial shape, sort of for the future, set up well to, continue to deliver product, acquire customers, and deliver the experience for the subscribers. So it was a membership business, and raised funding, raised $130 million, cleaned up a whole bunch of challenges in the business, got a fantastic team up and running that I hired in, really fantastic people. Anyway, so got the business into a really good place. And this was kind of like, this is 24, late 24, or kind of later in 24. And the business is primarily in San Francisco. We had gone remote, which is, I ended up getting hired remote. I was in Atlanta, but most people were in San Francisco or New York. And I just actually started to feel like it was important to have people in person more, for the culture and all the things that the company needed. I felt like I needed to be in person more. So I was finding myself traveling even more to San Francisco, but it was very challenging because I'm raising 2 kids in Atlanta. San Francisco, Atlanta is actually a very bad commute. The time changes I find. And then I felt it was, if I was going to depart, it was the right time, because I got the company into a really secure place, and the next person who probably should, have a slightly different, more entrepreneurial profile than me, quite honestly, would come in and begin the process of like, here's where we're going to go next. Like, here's the next growth trajectory. Not that I'm not entrepreneurial, but I am not built like a 0 to 1 entrepreneur the way you find, in the sort of Silicon Valley set, right? It's not my background.
Right.
I'm not fit for purpose, as my old chief people officer, and I'll give him a shout out, Matt Kennedy, who's like one of my favorite people I've ever worked with in my whole career. He used this term fit for purpose. I wouldn't be fit for purpose for that purpose. And that was going to be a 5-year purpose, I thought. So I went to the board and I said, I really think it's time for me to transition and for you all to find that right next person. And, it was actually a very difficult conversation, because I was very close with the board, and I felt like there was a ton of goodwill between all of us. And they really honestly didn't, they were so kind, and they said, we understand and respect your decision. We don't agree with it, but we understand and respect your decision. And they did. And then I stayed until they found a replacement and handed him the keys. I had decided in my mind I was going to take a break. And now part of it was because I knew it was going to be time for me to do something else. But when you're running that kind of a business and that kind of a moment, it is completely and utterly all consuming. So for 2.5 years, it was completely all consuming. There was no break in my mind. It was very, very, very difficult for me to mentally separate from the challenges of running the business. Even when I would go for a walk, even when I'm sitting with my kids, my brain is working on the business. And that's my own challenges, my own problematic ways of working and things I have to work on. But it was all consuming. And so when I got to the end of it, I was worn out, and also just, I think, running at the pace I'd run for so many years while raising kids without family help in the area, like it just kind of, I was like, I'm going to have to take a break. And it was September. The first day, I took my dog for a long walk along the Chattahoochee. I took a beautiful photo. It became my LinkedIn background, was the photo of the Chattahoochee River, because this is my new life.
So you were feeling like this was a good decision,
Yeah.
like you felt like, hey, I left on my own terms, and this just felt right.
I needed a break because, when you're in the you have to recognize, and the older you get, the more you're able to do this. You have to recognize when you're in a dense fog. And when you're in a dense fog, you cannot make good decisions about the long-term decisions about your life. You cannot. You have to find a way to the clearing. And I knew I had been in a dense fog for 2.5 years, right? I just talked about how I'm like, tomorrow, what do we have to get done? What do we have to get done next week? When you're like a little bit like that, and then your time horizon, because you're doing a bit of a turnaround, is short, and you're in a startup where your time horizon is short, you're in a fog. And so I was like, I have to find a clearing. And in the first month, I thought, I don't know if I'm ever going to work again. How am I going to find that energy? Because
you said, I love this.
How am I going to do this? Like I said, I lead with my energy, and the energy for work was gone. Like it was like, I've never run a marathon, but it's what I imagine it feels like after you finish, you cross the line of the marathon. You're like, oh, I never want to do that again. Like put me in a chair and rest. So maybe one of these days. So I did a lot of that, and then I began the process of thinking. A few months go by, and I regroup a little bit, and I was exercising I do love fitness, and so I was playing tennis, and I was working out and exercising all the time, and like thinking, what am I going to do? And I was all over the map of what I was going to do. I was even thinking like, I'll start my own business. I'll I don't know, I'll buy rental properties. I'll do like something. What do I know about owning rental properties? Absolutely nothing. So I started ruling things out. And I had a really good friend. You have friends, right? And friends help you through this. I had a really good friend who ironically is about to start her own sabbatical. And we would talk a lot. And she would help me think things through. So that was very useful. So I kind of, and then I talked to some different people about some different roles, but then somewhere around, I don't know, 6 months in, I did start to get more serious in my thought process about what do I need to solve for? And at this stage of my life, like in other words, stepping back and saying, we do have constraints in life. And we do have to solve for our constraints. And my constraints are, my youngest needs 5 more years till he graduates high school. And my kids need attention and support. I can't be on a plane, all over the place at this stage of my life. But at the same time, I want to be in an office, by the way, because I like working in an office. I was tired of, after 5 years of sort of COVID, of either working from home or being on a plane, to San Francisco. I didn't want either of those. And then what was left was, I like consumer businesses. I love digital and technology and capabilities. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is starting to get narrow. How am I going to find the right thing? And long story short, I got very clear, right, about those priorities, and said, I'll make all kinds of other trade-offs as I need to. Those are my priorities. And preferably a business not the size of Home Depot, preferably a mid-sized business. It didn't have to be a startup, probably not a startup, probably not an enormous business, a mid-sized business. So I interviewed for several things, some of which were good fits, but then my heart wasn't in them, some of which weren't. And somewhere kind of towards the end of the process, I get a call for like the perfect thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. And I ended up at Floor Decor. And we have a new CEO who's incredible and wonderful. And I was so excited. When I met him, I just instantly knew I love working for him. He's a great leader. He's got a great vision for the company. The role was exactly what I'm good at doing, what I know how to do. It met all my criteria. I couldn't believe it. And I was like, when do I sign? Like, when do I start? And I felt, and then the energy all came back. Like it just all came back in spades, which has been the best process because it's like you wonder, how am I going to get back to that high performance I've been before after I got so exhausted? And it all,
Yeah.
but I think it came back because I had the time, I had the rest, I had the time. And yeah, so it's been a great experience after that. But I think the sabbatical is a fabulous way to really reset and think. And I do think in middle age, because we're going to live and work for a long time. I'm 47. I've got another, hopefully 20 years of good, meaningful work ahead of me. But I needed that opportunity to pivot and think about what I wanted out of the next 20 years. So.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think for anybody to really think about, and it's not something that you just have to plan that out and all in one sitting. But I do like where you were saying, what your priorities are, and of course, money's a priority. Yes, of course. But I also like that you were just, talking about what you liked about some of your other opportunities, and they were probably great at a certain point of your life. And then your life has changed, your kids are getting older. And so that's okay that those things adjusted. And so I think hearing you sort of talk about, yes, you have the sabbatical time, but I still feel that things that if someone doesn't have that luxury to be able to do that, but I think the way that you sort of took it into chunks in a way. And I think the energy, I think for you talking about that is really great because I'm very sensitive to energy, and what, it drives me and what really gets me excited. And sometimes, people look at work and their position that it's not exciting. And it just may be the location of where you're at isn't exciting. And so to give yourself the permission to possibly look at other opportunities that could bring that light and energy back to you. And I think you talking about that, I think is really powerful. I love that. And one of the things that, I thought was really impactful that you said during our prep meeting to me is the reason why you work is for your family. And I think that focus right there is the pure motivation. Yes, of course you're working for the company, and of course we all know what that really means. But I think your internal is that you want to provide. And of course, your husband, for providing for the best life for your family as you possibly can. And I think hearing you say that, I also think was very unconventional, especially for the type of roles that you've held.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably didn't admit that to myself for years. And I love to work, right? So part of it is for me too. It really is. But and I guess maybe also it is for my family. It's also partly for me, but I've come to terms with this idea that and a lot of women deal with this, with the guilt around working. And
Sure.
I finally just sort of admitted to myself that in the world we live in today, it is important to have, to me, financial security and financial opportunity for my kids. And I think it's a very deep thing, right? I think my parents struggled. I think this is kind of, a personal thing. When I was in high school, I was, like I said, I was a good student. I ended up getting into Yale. I didn't go to Yale because it would have been, at the time, financial aid was different. And it would have just been, they thought, there was zero ability really for my parents to contribute in a meaningful way. And so I would have taken it all on in debt. And then my parents like, we'll figure it out. And I'm like, no, you're not figuring this out. This is too hard on you. So I took my full ride scholarship to Rice and I got pretty much a free education.
Wow.
That was my decision. But at the time, I promised myself that when it was my turn with my kids, I would be able to send them wherever they wanted to go. And I don't look at it like I have zero fault for my parents. Amazing people have done the best they can. And I thought to myself, I have the ability to provide a different level of opportunity and financial security for my kids. And so I think eventually I admitted to myself that's a big part of why I'm driven to work too. It just is, right? I just feel compelled to give them a good life. I think they've been given too good of a life. I forgot about the other side of that problem. That's all. I forgot about that part. So I'm working that back a little. But
now we're working on boundaries a little bit now.
Yeah, you don't need that purchase. You don't need more TikTok credits or whatever they use for. You don't need those things. So, you learn as you go. But yeah, I do think I think that's a big part of my motivation. And you're right, we don't admit those things. Men do. Men will admit those.
Yes.
Women don't as much, right? We don't. And I do think it's okay to say, look, I have the opportunity to contribute to my family and I'm going to do that.
Yeah, and I loved it. During our prep meeting together, there were a lot of poignant things, but I think just the way you phrased that, I wanted to make sure that we brought that up because I to your point that you just made, I don't think a lot of women have articulated that in a way that you just did, and obviously it was part of your journey where you were like, no, that is the reason why, that's a huge driving factor for you. And so I love that you shared that. We're getting close to time and I wanted to be able to, I know you're like, really already? I wanted to give you an opportunity if there was anything that you felt that we left out of our conversation, that you felt that you just wanted to kind of drive home. And then I hope you have a wonderful question for our Ask Dr. Alison.
Awesome. Well, there was one other part of this sabbatical that I thought for anybody out there who's kind of thinking about sabbatical and what should I do and the project of a sabbatical. And here's what I would say is going into it, I had all these ideas of how I wanted to spend my time. And then coming out of it, there was the reality of how I spent my time. And that was really good data. For example, I thought I'm going to have a garden. I'm going to grow vegetables. I didn't do any of that. And I had opportunities to do it. So I'm like, okay, scratch that off the list. Never thinking about that one again, which is great. But then what I would tell you is I gave myself permission to organically follow the areas where I wanted to go. It was like freedom, it was like this. And so if you take a sabbatical, creating that freedom and the thing that happened that really I think has changed how I think about the next 20 years of my life, which we didn't talk about, which was that I got super involved in my kids' school in the time that I was off, and I hadn't been able to do that before, and it's a small school, so I knew the headmaster really well. And there was a funny moment that I'll just never forget. We were at this, it was like the parents club meeting or something, and I was sitting with Fred, his name's Fred, Mr. Asaph. And he said, Krystal, you're not working this year, right? And I said, yeah, I'm taking the year off. And he said, can you teach AP macroeconomics? I said, what? And he said, well, our wonderful teacher is going out on maternity leave and we need somebody to teach for a couple months. And I said, I literally looked at him and I said, okay, I'll do it. And he was like so taken aback. And he's like, great, we'll get signed up. And then I was like, am I qualified? He's like, you're qualified. And so I threw myself into it. And for 2 months, I taught 60 seniors AP macroeconomics, got them ready for the AP exam. And I had the best time of my life. I've always been passionate about education. It's a huge part of who I am. And being in the classroom with these kids and 18-year-olds are the best. They're so bright and they're so optimistic about the world and they were so wonderful and I loved every minute of it. And so that was really unexpected. I guess I think I knew deep down inside, and I've always thought about maybe education, and it's such a big part of who I became and what I believe in. And so after that experience, it really helped me think about and plot out the rest of my years. I'm like, look, there's a lot of years to go, right? And so I don't know what it's going to look like, but I will have some role to play. Whether I don't know what it's going to look like. Maybe it's college and teaching a class in college at a business school or something, but working with young people, helping develop them, has to be part of my future. And I just gave myself this space to, and it was like serendipity. It happened, and I'm so delighted that it happened. And they actually offered me a job to come back and teach the following year. And I was like, well, give me 5 years or 7 years or something.
Right. Let me see when the 5-year itch happens again.
I'm not quite ready for that second stage, but I really do. And I think it's something we all need to think about as we get into middle age, is what do those later years look like? And how do we nurture those passions we've had through our lives and find a way to meaningfully contribute? So that's on my mind, and that happened in the sabbatical. So I think that was like the greatest thing that came out of it in a lot of ways.
Did it surprise you that it would be, because I know you're passionate about education, but did it surprise you that you would want to teach?
No, it didn't, because I've talked about it for many years. But what truly surprised me was how much joy I got out of it. It was the joy.
That's amazing.
And I think I love to work, but I think the amount of joy that happens on a daily basis it wasn't the same. It was just delightful to teach these kids.
Yeah. I could even just see the way you just lit up and how you just even talk about it. And I think that's really great. I think part of, as we do get to middle age, that, you are thinking about your professional career and what that kind of looks like. But I think to be able to even allow yourself to even process something outside of corporate and be able to even feel what that could even look like for you, depending what that was. And that opportunity certainly did not happen by accident at all. So that's really cool. I really appreciate you sharing that. So what is your question for me?
Well, I'm going to pick up on one of my words and ask you, what was the most unexpected choice you've made in your career history?
I would say it's this podcast. Because when I rebranded my company, this was kind of an exciting and then all of a sudden a little scary thing, because I was sort of like, well, who's going to come on to the show? What's this going to look like and feel like? And then I knew I didn't want it to be too businessy. I really wanted to bring back the human side of business, because we don't give ourselves enough time to kind of reflect on the human side, where, we more reflect on our achievements and our productivity and things of that nature. I'm glad I didn't really look into too much of what would go into podcasting, because I probably would not have gone. It's almost like 2 jobs in a way. But almost to the level of your teaching, I just feel like the guests that I have had on really want to get back and talk about areas of their life that they may not have either felt comfortable or felt that it was maybe important to share. And I feel that the podcast has really brought an educational piece in me giving back in a lot of ways by having these level of conversations. I gave myself a year to see if it would be something that I would really enjoy. And I just I get so excited about podcasts that I've done, the guests that I've had lined up. I mean, you and I have talked for a while, and I knew we were going to make it happen when it was going to happen. But I have gotten a lot of really great positive feedback. I have talked to people in the podcasting going, am I doing this right? And they're like, yeah, this, I really feel like it's more of an educational show than I do kind of a podcast in a way. But I've been very undeterred in a way that I just want to make it the best, have the best guests I can possibly get on the show. And at the end of the day, just so everyone feels comfortable to be human again. And that our work, we're not robots. We are humans, as you were talking about throughout our podcast. And I think it's important that we that we talk about our work and we talk about our families, because it's all kind of encompassing. So, yeah, I'm very undeterred in making this as successful as I could be. I've been very fortunate to have global guests on as well, and really just showing the human sides of business. So, yeah, that was a great question. Great. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great. That's what we need. We need more discussion about being human.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Young Conversations podcast. And to all of you that are here watching or listening to the show, thank you. And if this episode resonated with you, please don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so we can keep these Young Conversations going. Thank you so much again, Krystal. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.